It is the spring of 399 BCE. The sun, bright and indifferent, hangs over the city of Athens. From the high vantage of the Acropolis, the Parthenon gleams in white marble and gold, a testament to a glory that is already fading into memory. Below, in the dusty, crowded market of the Agora, a tragedy is unfolding that will determine the course of Western thought for the next 2.5 millennia. A young aristocrat named Plato, broad-shouldered and quiet, stands on the periphery of a crowd, watching his city commit a slow, judicial suicide. He is watching the wisest man in Athens being condemned to death by a democratic jury for the crime of speaking the truth. To understand the weight of this moment, to understand why Plato would spend the next 50 years of his life writing, teaching, and wrestling with the ghost of this day, we must first understand the city itself. This is not the confident imperial Athens of Pericles, the city that ruled the waves and pioneered democracy. That golden age has shattered. Athens is a broken city, humiliated by its total defeat in the Peloponnesian War against Sparta. The long walls, the great fortifications that once connected the city to the sea, have been torn down to the sound of Spartan flutes. The empire is dissolved, the treasury is empty. More deeply, the soul of the city is wounded. For a brief, terrifying period after the war, democracy was overthrown. A junta known as the 30 Tyrants, installed by Sparta, ruled through terror and purges. They executed citizens without trial, seized property, and turned neighbor against neighbor. Among these tyrants were men of Plato's own blood, his relatives Critias and Charmides. They were aristocrats, cultured men, men who had sat in the same circles as Socrates. When the Democrats finally retook the city and restored the rule of the people, they brought with them a deep, paranoid resentment. They were looking for the source of the rot. They were looking for someone to blame for the fact that the best and brightest of Athens had turned against her. And there, walking barefoot through the colonnades, wearing the same rough cloak summer and winter, was Socrates. He was 70 years old. To the eye, he was a grotesque figure. Sources tell us he had a snub nose, bulging eyes, and thick lips. He looked like a satyr or a Silenus figure from the bawdy plays. He possessed no wealth, held no office, and claimed no knowledge. Yet for decades he had been the most distinctive feature of the Athenian landscape. He was the gadfly, the oistros, a stinging fly that buzzes around a sluggish horse to keep it awake. Athens was the horse, great but lazy, prone to sleepwalking through its own existence. Socrates was the sting. His method was simple, and it was devastating. It was the elenchus, the method of refutation. He would approach a general and ask, "What is courage?" He would approach a priest and ask, "What is piety?" He would approach a politician and ask, "What is justice?" The men would answer with confidence, reciting the conventional wisdom, the definitions they had learned from the poets or their fathers. And then, gently, relentlessly, Socrates would ask questions. He would dismantle their definitions, point out the contradictions, and strip away their certainty layer by layer until they stood naked in their ignorance. He did this not to be cruel, though it often felt that way to those on the receiving end. He did it because he believed that the unexamined life is not worth living. He believed that false knowledge, thinking you know what you do not know, is the greatest disease of the soul. But in a city recovering from civil war, a man who questions everything is not seen as a healer, he is seen as a threat. The charges brought against him were vague but deadly: impiety, refusing to acknowledge the gods of the city, and corrupting the youth. The accusers, Meletus, Anytus, and Lycon, represented the poets, the craftsmen, and the politicians, the very classes Socrates had spent a lifetime embarrassing. But the real charge was unspoken. The charge was that Socrates made people think, and in doing so, he undermined the authority of the restored democracy. He had taught the young men of the aristocracy to question their elders, to question the laws, to question the very foundations of Athenian life. The trial takes place before a jury of 501 citizens chosen by lot. We must imagine the noise, the heat, the smell of hundreds of men pressed together on wooden benches. This is not a modern courtroom with a judge and carefully regulated procedure. It is a contest of rhetoric, a spectacle. In his defense, which Plato later reconstructs in the Apology, Socrates refuses to play by the rules. The custom in Athenian trials was to beg for mercy. Defendants would weep, tear their clothes, and bring their weeping children and wives to the stand to soften the hearts of the jurors. Socrates does none of this. He stands before them with an eerie, terrifying calm. He speaks to them not as a man pleading for his life, but as a teacher lecturing a wayward class. He explains that he is on a divine mission. The oracle at Delphi, the voice of the god Apollo, had once said that no man was wiser than Socrates. Socrates, knowing he knew nothing, set out to prove the god wrong by finding a wiser man. He questioned the politicians, the poets, the craftsmen. He found that while they each had technical skills, the artisan could make a shoe, the general could command a phalanx. They all made the fatal error of believing their technical skill gave them wisdom about the most important things: virtue, the good, and the beautiful. "I am the wisest," he tells the stunned jury, "only because I know that I know nothing." He tells them that he is a gift from the god to the city. "If you kill me," he warns, "you will not easily find another like me." He refuses to stop philosophizing. "Men of Athens, I honor and love you, but I shall obey the god rather than you." The vote is cast. Tokens are placed in urns. The result is close, closer than one might expect given his defiance. 280 votes for guilty, 220 for acquittal. A shift of only 30 votes would have saved him. Now comes the penalty phase. The prosecution demands death. By law, the defendant is allowed to propose an alternative punishment. If Socrates had proposed a moderate fine, or perhaps exile, the jury likely would have accepted it. They did not necessarily want his blood. They wanted him gone. They wanted the silence. But Socrates refuses to admit guilt. To propose a punishment would be to acknowledge he had done something wrong. Instead, with a supreme, almost playful irony, he proposes that since he has spent his life neglecting his own affairs to care for the souls of the citizens, he should be rewarded. He proposes that he be given free meals for life in the Prytaneum, the town hall, an honor reserved for Olympic victors and visiting kings. It is an act of breathtaking arrogance in the eyes of the jury. It is an act of absolute integrity in the eyes of Plato. Socrates is saying that the philosopher is of more value to the city than the athlete or the general. The jury is outraged. The second vote is cast. This time the margin is wider. 360 men vote for death. More people voted to kill him after hearing him speak than voted he was guilty. He has practically forced their hand. Plato watches this. He is 28 years old. He has spent his youth dreaming of a political career, as was expected of a man of his lineage. He is descended from kings and lawgivers. But as he watches the democratic machinery grind the life out of the only truly just man he has ever known, something breaks inside him. And in the breaking, something else is born. The democracy has revealed itself to be a tyranny of the mob. The collective wisdom of the people has proven to be collective madness. If the system can execute Socrates, then the system is fundamentally, structurally flawed. Justice, Plato realizes, cannot be found in the assembly. It cannot be found in the votes of the majority. It must be found somewhere else. Socrates is led away to the prison. The execution is delayed for a month because the sacred ship has sailed to Delos for a religious festival, and during its voyage no capital punishment is allowed. For 30 days, Socrates sits in his cell, fettered, receiving friends. They urge him to escape. Crito, his old friend, has arranged everything: bribes for the guards, a safe passage to Thessaly. Socrates refuses. In the dialogue Crito, Plato reconstructs the reasoning. To escape now, Socrates argues, would be to return evil for evil. He has lived his whole life under the laws of Athens. He has accepted the protection of the city, the legitimacy of its marriages, the education it provided. He entered into a tacit contract with the state. To break the law now, simply because the law has turned against him, would be to destroy the authority of all law. Do you imagine, he asks, that a state can subsist and not be overthrown, in which the decisions of law have no power but are set aside by private individuals? He will die as he lived, examining the arguments, following the path of reason, obeying his conscience. The final day arrives. Plato is not present. In the Phaedo, the narrator notes simply, "Plato, I think, was ill." Whether this was a physical illness or a sickness of grief, or perhaps a literary device to distance himself from the report, we cannot know. But the absence speaks volumes. The student cannot bear to watch the teacher's end. The sun begins to set over the western hills. The jailer enters with the cup of hemlock. It is a heavy, thick poison, ground from the root. Socrates takes the cup without a tremor in his hand. He does not weep. He asks only if he may pour a libation to the gods. The jailer says there is only enough poison for the dose. Socrates nods, offers a prayer for a safe migration from this world to the next, and drinks. He walks around the cell as instructed to let the poison work. His legs grow heavy. He lies down on his back. The numbness creeps up his body, from the feet to the calves to the thighs. It is a coldness, a solidification. The friends around him are dissolving into tears, covering their faces with their cloaks. Socrates rebukes them gently.
I sent the women away for this very reason, he says, for I have heard that a man should die in peace. Be quiet and have patience. The cold reaches his abdomen. He uncovers his face for one last moment. His final words are cryptic, a riddle that has puzzled philosophers for centuries. He says, "Chryso, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Pay the debt and do not neglect it." Asclepius is the god of medicine, the healer. We sacrifice to him when we recover from an illness. Socrates, in his final breath, is suggesting that death is not a catastrophe, it is a cure. He is being healed of the sickness of the physical world, released from the prison of the body, so that his soul may finally be free to see the truth clearly. He dies, and in the silence that follows, the long shadow of the Parthenon seems to stretch out and cover the world. For Plato, the death of Socrates is the defining trauma of his life. It acts as a prism through which all his future thought will pass. It poses a problem he must solve, or else despair. How can the world be structured in such a way that the just man is killed? If this world, the world of politics, of flesh and blood, of juries and hemlock, is the only world there is, then it is a place of horror. It is a place where power rules over wisdom. But what if this world is not the only world? It is here, in the shadow of this tragedy, that the seed of the theory of forms is planted. Plato begins to suspect that the justice Socrates spoke of, the true justice, does not exist in Athens. It does not exist in Sparta. It does not exist in any city built by human hands. It must exist somewhere else. It must exist as a perfect, unchanging standard, a reality beyond the reach of corrupt juries and deadly poisons. Athens killed the body of Socrates, but it could not kill the truth he served. And so Plato turns his back on the political career that was his birthright. He leaves Athens. He travels to Megara, to Egypt, to Italy, searching for the knowledge that can armor the soul against the injustice of the world. He takes upon himself a monumental task, to keep Socrates alive. In dialogue after dialogue, for the next 50 years, he will resurrect his teacher. He will make him speak again. He will make him question, laugh, and sting. He will build a city in speech, a republic where the philosopher is not killed, but crowned. The death of Socrates was the end of a man, but it was the beginning of a philosophy. It was the moment when the Western mind realized that the world we see with our eyes is not enough. We must look deeper. We must look higher. As night falls over the ancient city and the noise of the trial fades into history, we are left with the image of the young Plato, alone with his grief and his questions. He is about to embark on a journey of the mind that will take him out of the cave of shadows and into the light of the eternal. And he invites us, quietly, to follow him.
When the poison had done its work, and the body of Socrates lay cooling in the prison cell, a profound silence descended upon the mind of Plato. It was not merely the silence of grief, though that was heavy enough. It was the silence of a man who looks at the world around him, the solid walls of Athens, the faces of his friends, the statues of the gods, and realizes that he no longer knows what is real. He had watched the most just man in the world be condemned by a legal system that claimed to embody justice. He had seen truth crushed by the weight of opinion.
If the world was simply what it appeared to be, a chaotic jumble of atoms and politics, of appetites and accidents, then there was no meaning to be found. Life was a tragedy without a moral. But Plato could not accept that. He needed an anchor. He needed to find a place where the justice of Socrates was not a failure, but a triumph. And to find that place, he had to leave the world of the senses behind. He had to open a new eye, an inner eye, what he would later call the eye of the soul. To understand the journey Plato took, we must first grapple with the problem that haunted the Greek thinkers before him. It was the problem of flux. Decades earlier, the philosopher Heraclitus had stood by the banks of a river and uttered a sentence that has echoed through history. You cannot step into the same river twice. The water flows on. The river you stepped into a moment ago is gone, replaced by new waters. But Heraclitus went further. It is not just the river that changes. You change. The man who steps back onto the bank is not the same man who entered the water. His cells have aged. His memories have shifted. His mood has altered. Everything flows. Panta rei. Look at the world around you. The flower blooms, and in its blooming it is already beginning to die. The stone temple, built to last forever, is slowly being eaten by the wind and the rain. Even the mountains are crumbling, grain by sand grain, into the sea. Nothing holds still. Nothing simply is. Everything is always becoming something else. If this is true, if the world is a constant state of flux, then knowledge is impossible. How can you know something if it changes the moment you look at it? How can you define justice if it means one thing in Athens today and another tomorrow? How can you speak of beauty if the beautiful face eventually wrinkles and the beautiful vase eventually shatters? In a world of flux, truth is just a word we write on water. This was the abyss Plato faced, but he refused to fall into it. He remembered Socrates. Socrates had spent his life searching for definitions. He wanted to know what courage is, not just this brave deed or that brave deed, but courage itself. He wanted to know what piety is, not just a particular ritual, but the essence of holiness. Socrates believed that behind the changing, confusing examples of the world, there were fixed truths. He never claimed to have found them, but he lived his life as if they existed. Plato took this Socratic intuition and transformed it into a metaphysical cathedral. He proposed a radical solution. He suggested that there are in fact two worlds. There is the world we see with our eyes, hear with our ears, and touch with our hands. This is the sensible world, the world of becoming. It is the world of Heraclitus, where everything is in flux, everything is imperfect, everything dies. In this world, there is no true justice, only imperfect laws. There is no perfect circle, only roundish shapes drawn in the dust. There is no absolute beauty, only things that are beautiful for a moment before they fade. But Plato argues there is another world. It is a world invisible to the eyes, silent to the ears, and untouchable by the hands. It is accessible only to the intellect, to the reason. This is the intelligible world, and in this world exist the forms. The Greek word is eidos, or idea, but do not be misled by our modern use of the word idea. When we say idea, we usually mean a thought inside a human head, something subjective, something that exists only as long as we are thinking it. For Plato, the forms are not thoughts, they are realities. They are more real than the ground beneath our feet. They are the eternal, changeless, perfect archetypes of everything that exists in the physical world. Let us consider a simple example from geometry. Imagine you take a stick and draw a circle in the sand. You try your best, you keep your hand steady. But if you look closely, if you use a magnifying glass, you will see that the line is not perfect. It wavers, it has thickness, it is bumpy. It is not a true circle. A true circle is defined as a set of points perfectly equidistant from a center. No physical circle has ever met that definition. Every wheel, every coin, every drawing is flawed. And yet, you know what a circle is. When you do geometry, you are not calculating the area of the bumpy shape in the sand. You are calculating the perfect, invisible circle that exists only in your mind. Where is that circle? It is not in the sand. It is not in your brain, for if you died, the truth of the circle would remain true. It is not in time, for it does not age. It is in the realm of forms. The form of the circle is eternal. It never changes. It cannot be broken. It is the standard by which we judge all the imperfect circles of the visible world. When we say, "This plate is round," we are saying that this physical plate participates, however imperfectly, in the form of circularity. Now, Plato gently guides us to take a difficult step. He asks us to apply this logic not just to shapes, but to values, to the things that matter most. Think of a beautiful thing. Perhaps it is a sunset over the Aegean Sea. Perhaps it is the face of a youth. Perhaps it is a melody played on a lyre. We call all these things beautiful, but they are all different. The sunset is not the face is not the melody, and they are all temporary. The sun sets, the youth grows old, the music fades into silence. Yet there is something they all share. There is a quality, a presence that visits them for a time. Plato calls it, they participate in the form of beauty. Beauty itself, autotokalon. Imagine beauty not as a property of a thing, but as a vast, radiant ocean of reality. It is not beautiful in one way and ugly in another. It is not beautiful today and ugly tomorrow. It is absolute, separate, simple, and everlasting. All the beautiful things in our world are like mirrors reflecting a single distant sun. The mirrors may be cracked, they may be dusty, they may eventually shatter, but the sun they reflect does not change. This is the theory of forms. It is the claim that the world of our experience is a shadow world, a realm of ghosts and copies. The real world, the world that truly is, stands above it, fixed and eternal. For Plato, this was not a dry academic theory. It was a source of profound spiritual relief. It was the answer to the tragedy of Socrates. When the jury condemned Socrates, they killed his body. The body belongs to the world of becoming. It is flesh and bone. It is subject to the laws of flux. It ages. It feels pain. It can be poisoned. But the soul of Socrates, his mind, his reason, was attuned to the forms. He spent his life contemplating truth, justice, and goodness. And these things cannot be poisoned. These things cannot be killed by a vote of 360 men. By anchoring his mind in the forms, the philosopher transcends the tragedy of the physical world. He finds a refuge. Let us pause and consider the relationship between these two worlds. Plato uses a specific vocabulary to describe it. He speaks of participation, metexis, and mimesis, imitation.
Think of a red rose. It is a physical object. It grows in the earth, it smells sweet, it has thorns. Plato would say that the redness of the rose is not an accident. The rose is red because it participates in the form of redness. It is beautiful because it participates in the form of beauty. It is a plant because it participates in the form of plant. The forms are the causes of the physical world, not the mechanical causes, not the seed or the soil or the water, but the formal causes. They are the reasons why things are what they are. They are the blueprints of reality. Without the forms, the world would be a chaos of unintelligible sensation. We would see colors and shapes, but we would not be able to name them. We would not be able to say, this is a dog, or that is a tree. To name something is to recognize the form within it. To know is to see the one behind the many. There is a melancholy in this view, but also a great hope. The melancholy comes from realizing that everything we love in this world is flawed. No human institution is perfectly just. No human lover is perfectly faithful. No artistic masterpiece is perfectly beautiful. We are always embracing shadows. But the hope comes from the promise that we are not trapped among the shadows. We have a faculty within us that can transcend the senses. Plato calls this the intellect, or nous. It is the eyelid of the soul. Most of us go through life with this eye closed. We stare at the physical world, obsessed with money, reputation, and pleasure, things that, in the end, are just shifting dust. We are like dreamers who think the dream is real. Philosophy, for Plato, is the act of waking up. It is the slow, often painful effort to open the eye of the soul. In the dialogue Phaedo, written to memorialize the death of Socrates, Plato describes the body as a prison. The senses, sight, hearing, touch, are like bars on the window. They distract us. They pull us down. They tell us that reality is what we can eat and hold. They chain us to the flux. The philosopher tries to loosen these chains. He retreats from the noise of the market. He turns away from the demands of the appetites. He quiets the senses so that the reason can do its work. He engages in mathematics, not to build bridges or count coins, but to train his mind to see realities that have no physical body. When a mind understands that 2 + 2 = 4, it has grasped an eternal truth. It has touched the hem of the forms. This creates a hierarchy of reality. At the bottom are images and shadows, reflections in water, paintings, dreams. Above them are physical objects, trees, animals, stones. Above them are mathematical objects, numbers, shapes, geometric proofs. And at the very top, shining in the intelligible light, are the forms themselves. And among the forms there is a hierarchy too. Just as the sun is the source of light and life in the visible world, there is a supreme form in the intelligible world. Plato calls it the form of the good. The good is the highest reality. It is the source of all truth, all beauty, all justice. It is the reason the universe exists at all. All other forms derive their validity from the good. It is the God of the philosophers, not a person, not a figure with a beard throwing thunderbolts, but the absolute principle of perfection. To know the good is the ultimate goal of human existence. It is not enough to know facts. It is not enough to be clever. One must ascend to the vision of the good. For the young Plato,
Wandering in exile after the death of his teacher, Plato offered this theory a way to survive the chaos of history. Athens had fallen, democracy had failed, tyrants had risen, friends had died. The river of Heraclitus was flooding the world, washing away the old certainties. But the forms remained. High above the Parthenon, high above the squabbles of the Agora, the form of justice stood immovable. It did not depend on the votes of a jury. It did not depend on the whims of the gods. It simply was. This separation of the world into the physical and the spiritual, the temporal and the eternal, would become the defining characteristic of Western thought. It would shape theology, science, and art for thousands of years. It suggests that what we see is not all there is. It suggests that we are strangers in a strange land, exiles from a home we can dimly remember but cannot fully see. We feel this sometimes late at night when the house is quiet. We feel a longing for something we cannot name, a perfection that eludes us, a permanence that life denies us. Plato tells us that this longing is not an illusion. It is the soul's homesickness. It is the recognition that we belong to the world of being, even as we struggle through the world of becoming. The theory is demanding. It asks us to doubt the evidence of our own eyes. It asks us to trust the silence of our own minds. It suggests that the solid earth is a dream, and the invisible idea is the rock. As we drift deeper into this philosophy, we must prepare ourselves. Plato has shown us the architecture of reality. He has shown us the two worlds. Now he must show us how to move between them. He must show us the path from darkness to light. He will do this with a story about a cave, a fire, and the painful journey upward. But for now, let us rest in this thought, that the chaos of the world is not the final word, that beneath the changing tides of history there is a seabed of eternal truth, that the beautiful things we lose are safe in a place where loss cannot enter. The eyelid of the soul is heavy, but it is beginning to flutter open. The shadows are long, but the sun is rising, and Plato, the calm guide of the night, stands ready to lead us further in.
We have spoken of the two worlds. We have spoken of the world of flux, where things crumble and fade, and the world of forms, where things stand eternal and true. We have spoken of the eye of the soul, that inner faculty capable of seeing what the physical eyes cannot. But how does one open this eye? How does a human being, born in the mud and confusion of the senses, rise to the contemplation of the divine? It is not an easy journey. It is not a matter of simply learning a new set of facts or memorizing a new doctrine. It is a transformation. It is a violence done to the old self. To explain this, to explain the true nature of education and the philosopher's burden, Plato offers us an image. It is the most famous image in the history of philosophy. It appears in the 7th book of the Republic. It is a story of darkness, of light, and of the painful, necessary ascent from one to the other. It is the allegory of the cave. Let us descend in our imagination into the earth. Picture a vast subterranean cavern. It is damp and cold, cut off from the warmth of the day. Inside this cave there are human beings. They have been there since childhood, but they are not free to roam. They are fettered.
Chains bind their legs and their necks, holding them fast so that they must sit facing the back wall of the cave. They cannot turn their heads. They cannot look at one another. They can only see what is in front of them, the rough stone wall of the cavern. Behind the prisoners, high up and far away, a fire is burning. It casts a flickering, smoky light. Between the fire and the prisoners there runs a raised path like a stage, and along this path there is a low wall like the screen a puppeteer uses to hide himself. Behind this wall, people are walking. They carry objects, statues of men, figures of animals, tools, vessels of wood and stone. They hold them up above the wall so that the light of the fire catches them. The prisoners cannot see the fire. They cannot see the people carrying the objects. They cannot see the objects themselves. All they can see are the shadows. The fire casts the shadows of the objects on the back wall of the cave. The prisoners watch the shadows dance. They see a shadow horse. They see a shadow pot. They see a shadow warrior. And because the cave echoes when the people walking behind the wall speak, the prisoners hear the voices bouncing off the stone. They believe the sounds are coming from the shadows. For these prisoners, the shadows are reality. They have never seen anything else. They do not know that there is a fire. They do not know there are three-dimensional objects. They do not know there is a world outside. If you told them that what they saw was an illusion, a mere projection, they would not understand you. To them, the shadow is the horse. The shadow is the truth. They take this world very seriously. They develop a science of shadows. They give prizes to the man who has the sharpest eyes, who can remember the order in which the shadows pass, who can predict which shadow will come next. They call this man wise. They honor him. They believe he understands the nature of the world. This, Plato tells us gently, is our condition. We are the prisoners. The cave is the visible world, the world of the senses. The shadows are the trivial things we obsess over: money, fame, political victories, the endless stream of images that flicker on the walls of our lives. We think they are real. We think they are substantial. We fight over them. We award prizes to those who are best at manipulating them. But we are looking at phantoms. We are asleep in a prison of our own making, mistaking the copy for the original. But now, imagine a change. Suppose one of the prisoners is set free. His chains are struck off. He is compelled to stand up. He is told to turn his head. He is told to look toward the light. It is not a moment of joy. It is a moment of agony. His limbs are stiff from years of immobility. The movement causes him pain, and when he turns around, his eyes, accustomed only to the gloom, are dazzled by the glare of the fire. The light burns him. He is blinded. He cannot see the objects whose shadows he used to watch. He is confused. If someone were to tell him, "Look, what you saw before was nonsense. Now you are nearer to being, and you see more truly," he would not believe it. The objects passing on the wall look blurry to his watering eyes. The shadows on the wall were sharp and clear. He would think the shadows were truer than these new, painful things. He would want to turn back. He would want to sit down, put on his chains, and return to the comfort of the darkness. This is the resistance of the mind to education. We do not want to be woken up. We prefer the comfortable lie to the difficult truth. We prefer the shadows we know to the light we do not. But suppose he is not allowed to return. Suppose someone drags him by force up the rough, steep ascent of the cave, up the jagged path, pulling him toward the mouth of the cavern. He resists. He is angry. The journey is hard. And then he is dragged out into the sunlight. The shock is total. The radiance of the sun overwhelms him. He is completely blinded now. He can see nothing at all of what is called the real world. He must lower his eyes. He must wait. Gradually, his eyes adjust. The process must be slow. At first, he can only look at shadows, the shadows of trees and rocks cast on the ground. These are familiar to him. They remind him of the cave. Then he can look at reflections, the image of a tree in a quiet pool of water. Then he can look at the objects themselves. He sees the tree, the rock, the bird. He sees the texture of the bark, the color of the wing. He realizes that these things are solid, vibrant, alive in a way the shadows never were. Then he lifts his eyes to the heavens. He looks at the moon and the stars by night. He contemplates the vast, silent order of the cosmos. And finally, when his sight is strong enough, he dares to look at the sun itself. He does not look at its reflection in water. He looks at the sun in its own place. He contemplates it as it is. He realizes that the sun is the cause of everything he sees. It gives the seasons and the years. It is the steward of all visible things. It provides the light that makes sight possible and the warmth that makes life possible. He understands that the fire in the cave was just the dim, smoky imitation of this great burning star. He remembers his old habitation. He remembers the wisdom of the cave, the prizes, the shadows, and he pities them. He would rather be a slave in the house of a landless man, as Homer says, than to live that life and hold those opinions. He is free. This ascent is the education of the philosopher. It is the journey of the dialectic. The cave is the realm of opinion, doxa. The outside world is the realm of knowledge, episteme. The sun represents the highest reality of all, the form of the good. Let us dwell for a moment on this sun. In the visible world, the sun allows the eye to see and the object to be seen. In the intelligible world, the form of the good allows the mind to know and the truth to be known. But it does more. The sun gives generation and growth to the plants of the earth. In the same way, the good gives being and reality to the forms. The good is not just another idea. It is the source of all ideas. It is beyond being, exceeding it in dignity and power. It is the absolute principle of value, the moral center of the universe. To see it is to understand the purpose of existence. It is the beatific vision. But the story of the cave does not end with the vision. It does not end with the philosopher basking in the warmth of the sun, content in his own salvation. Plato asks a hard question. What must this man do now?
It would be easy to stay above. It would be delightful to remain in the meadows of truth, contemplating the eternal. But he remembers the prisoners. He remembers his fellow human beings, still bound in the dark, still fighting over shadows. Justice compels him to return. He must leave the sunlight. He must descend again into the cave. He must walk back down the rough, steep path into the damp and the gloom. Imagine him coming back to his old seat. His eyes are full of darkness now, not because he is blind, but because they are still dazzled by the sun. He cannot see the shadows clearly anymore. He squints, he stumbles.
The other prisoners watch him. They see him fumbling. They see that he is no longer good at the game of guessing shadows. He looks foolish. He looks ruined. They say to one another, "Look at him. He went up, and he came back with his eyes corrupted. It is dangerous to go up. It destroys a man." They laugh at him. But suppose he tries to free them. Suppose he tries to explain to them that the shadows are not real, that there is a world of light above. He tells them about the trees, the stars, the sun. They do not believe him. They think he is mad. They think he is arrogant. And if he tries to unchain them, if he tries to drag them up the path against their will, what will they do? They will say he is disturbing the peace. They will say he is corrupting the order of the cave. Plato writes in a line that chills the blood, "If they could lay hands on the man who was trying to free them and lead them up, they would kill him." Here, the allegory touches history. The man who returns to the cave is Socrates. Socrates tried to tell the Athenians that their obsession with wealth and reputation was a game of shadows. He tried to turn them toward the virtue of the soul. He tried to lead them to the light. And because he made them feel foolish, because he disrupted their comfort, they killed him. The allegory of the cave is a tragedy, but it is also a mandate. It tells us what a philosopher is. The philosopher is not a man who withdraws from the world to think clever thoughts. He is a man who owes a debt. He has seen the good, and because he has seen the good, he must serve it. He must go down. He must govern. He must teach. This is the central tension in Plato's thought. The life of contemplation is the highest life, the happiest life. But the life of action is the necessary life. The philosopher returns to the cave not because he wants to, but because he must. He rules not for the love of power, but for the love of those he rules. This brings us to the true definition of education, paideia. In our modern world, we often think of education as putting knowledge into a soul that doesn't have it, like putting sight into blind eyes. We think it is about transferring information, learning skills, filling the memory. Plato says no. The power to learn is already present in the soul. The eye is already there, but it is facing the darkness. It is facing the darkness. Education is the art of turning around. It is the pedagogy. It is grabbing the soul by the shoulders and physically turning it away from the world of becoming and toward the world of being. It is redirecting desire. It is teaching the soul to love the right things. The teacher cannot see for the student. The teacher can only turn the student toward the light. The student must do the seeing. The student must walk the path. As we lie in the quiet of the night, let us imagine ourselves in that cave. The screen of our mind is filled with flickering images, worries about tomorrow, memories of yesterday, the endless chatter of the world. They feel so real. They demand our attention. But Plato invites us to close our eyes to the shadows, to turn away from the wall, to realize that there is a fire burning behind us, and beyond that, a sun. He invites us to consider that our confusion, our anxiety, our sense of being lost, these are just the pains of the turning. They are the dazzling of eyes that are beginning to wake up. We are not creatures of the dark. We are creatures of the light. We belong to the sun. The journey out of the cave is steep and rugged. It takes a lifetime. There are no shortcuts. We must move from shadows to objects, from objects to stars, from stars to the sun. We must move from guessing to believing, from believing to thinking, from thinking to knowing. But we do not walk alone. We have guides. We have the voice of Socrates echoing down the centuries, urging us to question, to seek, to examine. We have the vision of Plato mapping the path ahead. The cave is vast and the chains are heavy, but the chains are not of iron. They are made of ignorance, and the key to the lock is already in our hands. The philosopher stands at the mouth of the cave, bathed in the light of the good, and he calls to us. He tells us that the air is sweet up there. He tells us that the world is wider than we dream. He tells us to be brave. He tells us to stand up. And as we drift into sleep, we can let the shadows fade. We can let the noise of the puppeteers fall silent. We can turn, slowly, gently, toward the source of the light. We can rest in the knowledge that the sun is there, shining in the eternal stillness, waiting for us to open our eyes.
We have stood at the mouth of the cave, blinded by the sudden radiance of the sun. We have spoken of the ascent, the rugged path that leads from the shadows of illusion to the bright meadows of truth. But now we must ask a question closer to home. Who is the traveler? What is this thing within us that is capable of climbing? What is this part of us that finds the shadows unsatisfied, that longs for the light, that recognizes the sun when it finally sees it? We call it the self. We call it the mind. But Plato uses a word that carries a heavier, more ancient weight. He calls it the psyche, the soul. To understand Plato's vision of the soul is to look into a mirror and see something far stranger and far older than the face you recognize. We tend to think of ourselves as a single unit, one person, one will, one mind. But Plato asks us to look closer. He asks us to notice the cracks in the surface. Have you ever found yourself in a state of inner conflict? Perhaps there is something you desire, a rich food, a forbidden pleasure, a moment of anger. Part of you wants it desperately. It pulls you toward the object of desire like a magnet. But at the very same moment, there is another part of you that holds back, a quiet voice that says, "No, this is not good for you. This is not right." And perhaps there is even a third part, a flash of indignation, a frustration with yourself for being tempted at all. If you were truly one single thing, how could you be at war with yourself? How could you be the thirsty man who wants to drink and simultaneously the wise man who refuses the cup? In the Republic, Plato dissects this inner turmoil. He suggests that the human soul is not a monolith. It is a city. And like any great city, it is populated by different classes of citizens, each with their own nature, their own desires, and their own work to do. He divides the soul into 3 parts. The first and lowest part is the appetitive soul, the epitheumetikon. This is the part of us that is closest to the biology of the body. It is the seat of raw desire. It wants food, it wants drink, it wants sex, it wants comfort. It is like a blind, hungry beast. It has no concept of tomorrow, no concept of consequence. It knows only, "I want." It is a necessary part of us. Without it, we would starve. We would not reproduce. But it is dangerous. If left to rule the city of the soul, it becomes a tyrant.
It consumes everything until the city collapses in gluttony and chaos. The second part is the spirited soul, the thumos. This is the seat of emotion, of passion, and above all, of honor. It is the part of us that feels anger when we see injustice. It is the part that feels shame when we act cowardly. It is the part that seeks victory and reputation. It is fierce, like a well-trained dog. It loves to fight. When we grit our teeth and push through pain to achieve a goal, that is the thumos at work. It is noble, but it is volatile. The third and highest part is the rational soul, the logistikon. This is the part that loves truth. It is the part that calculates, that looks ahead, that understands the forms. It is the little voice of reason that whispers to the appetites, "Not now," and says to the spirit, "Steady." It cares for the whole soul. It seeks the good. A just soul, Plato tells us, is one where these three parts live in harmony. Reason rules. Spirit acts as its ally, enforcing the decrees of reason. And appetite obeys, kept in check, fed enough to be healthy, but not enough to be master. But words can be dry. Plato knows that the soul is not a diagram. It is a living, moving force. And so, in the dialogue Phaedrus, he gives us a myth. He paints a picture so vivid, so dynamic, that once you see it, you will never forget it. Imagine a chariot racing through the heavens. It is drawn by two winged horses. The charioteer stands at the reins. He is the reason, the logistikon. He is the pilot of the soul. His task is to guide the chariot up toward the rim of the sky, to catch the glimpse of the great procession of the gods and the eternal truths they contemplate. But his team is difficult. One horse is white. It is tall, upright, with clean limbs. It holds its head high. It needs no whip, only a verbal command. This is the spirit, the thumos. It loves honor. It loves modesty. It loves self-control. It wants to follow the gods. It tries to pull the chariot upward. The other horse is black. It is crooked, heavy, ill-formed. It has bloodshot eyes and a short, thick neck. It is shaggy and deaf. This is appetite. It is the heavy weight of earthly desire. It does not want to fly. It wants to graze. It pulls the chariot down, toward the earth, toward the pleasures of the flesh. Imagine the struggle of the charioteer. He is pulling back on the reins with all his might, sweat pouring down his face. The white horse is surging up. The black horse is plunging down. The chariot shudders and bucks. The soul is torn between gravity and flight. This is the human condition. We are not angels floating effortlessly in the light, and we are not beasts content to wallow in the mud. We are the charioteer. We are the tension between the two. Our life is a constant, precarious balancing act, a flight on broken wings. But why are we flying? Where are we trying to go? And why are we here in these heavy bodies walking on the earth? Here, Plato introduces one of his most profound doctrines. It is the doctrine of anamnesis, recollection. Have you ever learned something, a mathematical truth, a deep moral principle, and felt a sudden strange click of recognition? You hear it, and you do not feel like you are hearing it for the first time. You feel as though you are being reminded of something you already knew, something you had simply forgotten. It feels like finding a lost key in a pocket you haven't checked in years. Plato says this feeling is real. Learning is not the filling of a bucket. Learning is remembering. In the dialogue Meno, Socrates demonstrates this. He calls over a slave, a boy who has had no education, no training in geometry. Socrates draws a square in the dust. He asks the boy questions. He does not teach him, he only asks. If we double the side of this square, what happens to the area? At first, the boy guesses wrong. He is confused. But Socrates guides him step by step, asking, probing, and suddenly the boy sees the answer. He realizes how to construct a square double the area of the first. He proves a complex geometric theorem. Socrates turns to Meno and asks, "Did anyone teach him this?" No, the knowledge was inside him all along. How can an uneducated boy contain the truths of geometry? How can we, who live in an imperfect world, know the definition of a perfect circle? How can we, who see only flawed justice, judge a law to be unjust? We have no example of perfection in this world to compare it to. Therefore, Plato argues we must have seen the perfection somewhere else. Before we were born, before our souls fell into these bodies, we were like the charioteer in the sky. We traveled in the train of the gods, Zeus, Apollo, Athena. We circled the upper heavens, and there, in the plain of truth, we saw the forms. We saw justice itself, shining and pure. We saw temperance. We saw knowledge. We saw the good. Our souls were nourished by this vision. We knew everything. We were at home in the realm of being.
But the black horse was strong. The unruly desires dragged us down. We lost our wings. We fell from the sky, heavy and dizzy, and we crashed into the physical world. We were imprisoned in a body, a shell like an oyster. And in the violence of birth, in the shock of becoming flesh, we forgot. The trauma of embodiment wiped our memory clean. We drank from the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. So here we are, wandering the earth, amnesiacs. We think we are ignorant, but we are not. The truth is still there, buried deep in the sediment of the soul, covered by the dust of the senses. This changes everything about how we live. When we see a beautiful face, the sudden intake of breath, the ache in our chest, it is not just biology, it is a memory. The beauty of the person reminds us dimly, faintly, of the beauty we once saw in the heavens. It stirs the old wings. It makes them itch to grow again. When we study mathematics, we are not learning new tricks. We are clearing away the dust. We are uncovering the ancient text written on the heart. This is why the philosopher is often strange, often distant. He is a man trying to remember a dream. He looks at the world and sees clues, reminders, symbols of a home he has lost. And if the soul existed before birth, surely it must exist after death. In the Phaedo, on his last day, Socrates comforts his weeping friends with this logic. They are terrified that when he drinks the poison, his soul will disperse like smoke in the wind. They fear that death is the end of the self. Socrates smiles. He asks them to consider the nature of things that break. What kind of things can be broken? What kind of things can be scattered? Only things that are composite, things made of parts. A chair can be broken because it is made of wood and glue. A body can decay because it is made of blood and bone and tissue. But the soul? The soul is what grasps the forms.
The soul is akin to the invisible, the eternal, the simple. It is not made of parts, it is a unity. And what is not made of parts cannot be taken apart. It cannot be destroyed. Death, Socrates argues, is not a destruction. It is a separation. It is the release of the prisoner. Throughout life, the body has been a distraction. It gets hungry, it gets sick, it gets tired, it fills the mind with noise. The philosopher spends his entire life trying to ignore the body, trying to concentrate on the soul. He practices withdrawing his attention from the senses. In this sense, Socrates says, true philosophers make dying their profession. Melete thanatou, the practice of death. It sounds morbid to our modern ears, but he means it as a practice of freedom. He means living in such a way that you are not enslaved by the black horse, living in such a way that when the final moment comes, when the jailer brings the cup, you are not torn away from the body with violence and regret. You slip out of it like a man stepping out of heavy, wet clothes. You are ready to go back. Plato paints a picture of the afterlife that is both just and hopeful. The soul, freed from the body, is judged. It carries with it nothing but its education and its character. The money it earned, the clothes it wore, the reputation it built, all these are left behind on the funeral pyre. The soul that has lived in gluttony and violence, the soul that let the black horse rule, is heavy. It is weighed down by the accretions of the flesh. It cannot rise. It wanders as a ghost among the tombs, or it is pulled back into another body, perhaps a beast, perhaps a tyrant, to try again. It is trapped in the cycle of reincarnation. But the soul that has purified itself, the soul that has practiced philosophy, is light. It is wind. It rises back to the place it came from. It rejoins the company of the gods. It returns to the contemplation of the truth, not through a glass darkly, not through a shadow of a shadow, but face to face. This is the great comfort of Platonism. It tells us that we are not accidental tourists in the universe. We are not temporary biological machines. We are immortals. We are travelers on a long journey that did not begin with our birth and will not end with our death. The confusion we feel, the longing, the sense of being out of place, this is not a sickness. It is a sign of our nobility. It is the royalty of the soul, remembering its kingdom. As you lie in the dark, consider this inner geography. Consider the city within you, the appetites that ask for more, the spirit that seeks to be good, the reason that guides the way. They are all there. They are the team of horses you must drive. And if you feel that you have forgotten who you are, if the world feels heavy and ineligible, remember Plato's promise. You have not lost the truth. You have only misplaced it. It is there, waiting in the quiet library of the mind. The body rests, the senses dim, the black horse sleeps, and the white horse lowers its head. The charioteer lays down the reins. In sleep, perhaps, we loosen the chains of the cave a little. We drift near the river of memory. We are old souls, resting from the labor of being human, waiting for the dawn to remind us once again of the light we know is there.
We have looked upward to the sun and inward to the soul. We have seen the individual human being as a creature of conflict,
a charioteer struggling to hold the reins of two unruly horses. But a human being does not live alone. We are not solitary stars burning in the void. We live together. We live in families, in villages, in cities. We live in the company of others. And so, the question of justice cannot be answered only in the silence of the private mind. It must be answered in the noise of the street. How can we live together without destroying one another? How can the clash of thousands of appetites, thousands of ambitions, be resolved into a harmony? To answer this, Plato invites us to descend. In the Republic, he takes us down to the Piraeus, the bustling port of Athens. It is a place of sailors, merchants, and foreigners, a place of constant motion and trade. It is here, in the house of an old man named Cephalus, that the greatest conversation in the history of philosophy begins. The question is simple, deceptively so. What is justice? At first, the answers are conventional. Justice is telling the truth. Justice is paying your debts. Justice is helping your friends and harming your enemies. But Socrates, with his gentle, relentless questioning, unravels them all. These are rules of thumb, not definitions. Then a shadow falls across the conversation. A sophist named Thrasymachus breaks in. He is angry, cynical, weary of this high-minded talk. He offers a definition that echoes the brutal reality of the world we know too well. Justice, Thrasymachus declares, is nothing but the advantage of the stronger. It is a chilling thought. He argues that laws are made by the powerful to serve their own interests. The tyrant makes laws to keep himself rich. The democracy makes laws to keep the mob fed. There is no divine right, no eternal standard. There is only power. The strong take what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. If Thrasymachus is right, then the world is a slaughterhouse. If he is right, the philosopher is a fool. Socrates must answer this. He must prove that justice is not just a tool of the weak or a mask for the strong. He must prove that justice is good in itself, that it is the health of the soul, better than all the gold in Persia. But the soul is hard to see. It is hidden deep within us, small and subtle. So Socrates makes a proposal. He suggests a thought experiment. Suppose, he says, that we are short-sighted and are asked to read small letters from a distance. We cannot do it. But suppose we discover that the same text is written on a larger surface in larger letters. Would it not be wise to read the large letters first and then check the small ones? The small letters are the individual soul. The large letters is the city. If we can construct in our imagination a perfectly just city, a Callipolis, we might see justice written there in a size we can read. We can watch justice come into being, and then, having seen it in the state, we can look back at the individual and find the same pattern. So, let us build a city in speech. We begin with necessity. A city exists because no one is self-sufficient. We need food, shelter, clothing, so we gather together. One man is a farmer, another a builder, another a weaver. This is the city of pigs, a simple, healthy community of producers meeting basic needs. But human desire is not simple. We want more than barley cakes and blankets. We want sofas, perfumes, incense, gold. We want luxury. And as the city swells with these desires, it becomes feverish. It needs more land. It needs to protect its wealth. It encounters conflict with its neighbors. And so the city needs a new class of citizens. It needs guardians. These must be special men and women. They must be like noble dogs, fierce to wolves, but gentle to the schlock. They must have spirit. They must be brave. But who will guard the guardians? If they have weapons and strength, what stops them from turning on the sheep and becoming wolves themselves? This brings us to the structure of the just city. Plato divides his imaginary state into three distinct classes, mirroring the three parts of the soul we explored in the chariot myth. At the bottom are the producers, the farmers, the craftsmen, the merchants. They correspond to the appetitive part of the soul. They are the engine of the economy. Their virtue is temperance, moderation. They must accept that they are not the rulers. They provide the material basis for life. Above them are the auxiliaries, the soldiers and police. They correspond to the spirit, the tumus. Their virtue is courage. They protect the city from enemies without and rebellion within. They are the enforcement of the law. And at the very top, the smallest group are the rulers, the true guardians. They correspond to reason. Their virtue is wisdom. They do not work in the fields, nor do they simply fight. They think, they plan, they look to the good of the whole city. And now we can answer the question, what is justice? Justice is not a specific law. It is not paying debts. Justice is a structural harmony. Justice in the city is the state in which each class does its own work and does not interfere with the others. Injustice is confusion. It is when the merchant tries to be a general or when the soldier tries to rule. It is when the appetite tries to dictate policy or when the spirit tries to solve a math problem. When the parts engage in meddling, the city falls into chaos. Justice is the stillness of everything in its proper place. And now Socrates turns the telescope around. He looks back at the individual soul. The large letters have revealed the secret of the small ones. A just man is a city in miniature. He has a mob of appetites within him, hunger, greed, lust. He has a spirited part, anger, pride, and he has a rational part. He is just when his reason rules, guiding his life toward the good. He is just when his spirit supports his reason, giving him the willpower to do what he knows is right. And he is just when his appetites obey, satisfied but silent. The just man is not at war with himself. He is a unified whole. He is like a musical instrument that has been perfectly tuned. The high notes, the middle notes, and the low notes all sound together in a single concord. He is at peace. But Plato is not done. He knows that building this city is easy in words, but difficult in reality. How do we ensure that the rulers actually rule for the good of the city? How do we prevent them from becoming corrupt? Here, the Republic moves into its most radical and controversial waters. Plato proposes 3 waves of change, each more shocking than the last to his Athenian audience. First, he argues that women must be educated and rule alongside men. If a woman has a philosophical nature, she should be a guardian. The soul has no gender. This was a revolutionary thought in a world where women were confined to the loom and the hearth. Second, and perhaps most famously, he proposes the abolition of private family and private property for the guardian class. The rulers must possess nothing, no gold, no silver, no private land. They must live in common barracks. They must eat at common tables. They must have no private wives or husbands. Even their children are to be raised in common nurseries, so that no parent knows which child is their own, and every adult looks upon every child as a son or daughter. Why such severity? Why this extreme communism of the elite? Plato's logic is cold and clear. The enemy of the state is division. The moment a ruler says, "This is my house," or "This is my son," he has a private interest that competes with the public interest. He will favor his own child over the child of the city. He will hoard gold for his own family rather than spending it on the fleet. By stripping the rulers of private attachments, Plato seeks to create a class of people who have no interest other than the good.
They are to be pure instruments of the state. They will be happy not because they own things, but because they are fulfilling their nature. They are serving the whole. But who are these rulers? Who could possibly accept such a life, devoid of wealth and family? This leads to the third and greatest wave, the central paradox of the Republic. Unless, Socrates says, philosophers become kings in our cities, or those whom we now call kings and potentates take to the pursuit of philosophy seriously and adequately, there can be no cessation of evils for the states, nor, I fancy, for the human race. The philosopher king. It sounds like a contradiction. In Athens, philosophers were seen as useless stargazers, men with their heads in the clouds. Kings were men of action, men of swords. But remember the cave. The philosopher is the one who has ascended. He is the one who has seen the sun. He is the only one who knows what justice actually is. The politician guesses. The philosopher knows. Therefore, he is the only one fit to rule. But here is the irony. The true philosopher does not want to rule. He prefers the contemplation of the forms. He prefers the quiet of the academy. If a man wants to be king, he is already disqualified because he desires power. The just city requires a ruler who rules out of necessity, not out of ambition. We must force the philosopher to go back down into the cave. We must tell him, "You have been educated by the city. You have seen the truth. Now you must pay your debt. You must govern." He will accept the burden, not because it is pleasant, but because it is just. This vision of the Callipolis, the beautiful city, has haunted the Western imagination. It has inspired utopians and horrified liberals. It has been called a blueprint for totalitarianism, a rigid hierarchy where freedom is sacrificed for order. But as we listen in the quiet of the night, we must remember that Plato was not writing a constitution for a real city of brick and mortar. He explicitly admits near the end of the dialogue that such a city may never exist on earth. It makes no difference, Socrates says, whether it exists now or ever will come into being. Why? Because the Republic is not a political manifesto. It is a metaphor. The city is a mirror for the soul. Plato is telling us how to build a constitution within ourselves. He is telling us that we must banish the tyrant from our own hearts. We must not let the desire for money or pleasure rule us. We must find the philosopher king within our own minds, the rational part, and give it the crown. We must build the barracks of the guardians in our own spirits, practicing self-control, limiting our attachment to material things so that we can be free. The ideal state is a pattern laid up in heaven, he says, for him who wishes to contemplate it, and so beholding, to constitute himself its citizen. Whatever city we live in,
Whether it is Athens or Rome or London or New York, we can be citizens of the Callipolis in our hearts. We can live by its laws. We can cultivate the inner harmony where reason rules the chaos of the passions. This is the ultimate answer to Thrasymachus. The tyrant, the man who grabs power and pleasure, is not strong. He is weak. He is a slave to his own appetites. His soul is a city in civil war, full of fear and regret. The just man, even if he is poor, even if he is in prison, is free. He is the monarch of his own soul. He has achieved the peace that the world cannot give. The construction of the city is complete. The walls are built. The laws are set. It stands white and perfect in the landscape of the imagination. It is a severe place, silent and ordered. It is not a place for cozy domesticity. It is a place for the strenuous ascent toward perfection. It reminds us that peace, true peace, the peace of sleep and the peace of life, is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of order. It is the music of a life where everything is in its proper place. As the image of the great city fades into the night, we turn our gaze back to the individual soul. We have established justice. We have established wisdom. But there is one force we have not yet fully explored, a force that can drive the soul upward with a power even greater than duty. We must speak of love. We must leave the council chambers of the Republic and go to the banquet hall. We must put down the laws and pick up the wine cup. For Plato knows that we are not moved only by logic. We are moved by the beautiful. And so we prepare to climb the next ladder, the ladder of Eros, where we will learn that the love of a beautiful face and the love of the highest truth are, in the end, the same love, burning at different intensities. But for now, let the city guard your rest. Let the guardians watch the gates of your dreams. The balance is held. The harmony is achieved. The city is at peace, and so are you.
We have built the city of justice. We have laid its foundations in reason and raised its walls with discipline. It is a noble place, this city of the mind, ordered, symmetrical, and safe. But as we walk its silent streets in our imagination, we might feel a certain coolness in the air. We might feel that something is missing. Justice is the skeleton of the good life, but it is not the blood. Reason can guide the chariot, but it cannot make the horses run. For that, we need a force that is wilder, hotter, and more dangerous. We need the force that drives the universe itself. We need love. In the Greek tongue, the word is eros. To understand Plato's vision of love, we must leave the austere barracks of the Republic. We must travel to a different setting. We find ourselves at a dinner party, a symposium. The date is 416 BC. The host is Agathon, a young playwright who has just won a great victory at the theater festival. To celebrate, he has invited the brightest minds of Athens to his home for an evening of wine and conversation. The atmosphere is relaxed. The flute girls have been sent away. The guests recline on couches, passing the cup. Among them are the comic poet Aristophanes, the doctor Eryximachus, and, of course, Socrates, barefoot as always, but washed and wearing fresh robes for the occasion. They decide that instead of drinking themselves into oblivion, they will play a game.
Each man must make a speech in praise of Eros, the god of love. One by one they speak. They praise love as the oldest god, the bringer of happiness, the healer of mankind. Aristophanes, the playwright who made all Athens laugh, tells a story that is both whimsical and heartbreaking. He says that long ago, human beings were not shaped as we are now. We were round, spherical creatures. We had 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces looking in opposite directions. We were powerful and complete. We rolled over the earth like cartwheels. But we became arrogant. We tried to scale the heights of heaven to attack the gods. Zeus, wanting to punish us without destroying us entirely, decided to cut us in half. He sliced the spherical humans down the middle like cutting a fruit in 2. Apollo stitched up the wound, which is our navel, and turned our faces toward the cut so we would remember our punishment. Since that day, Aristophanes says, every human being is only half a person. We wander the world, feeling an ancient ache, looking for our other half. And when we find it, we wrap our arms around each other, trying to melt back into one, trying to heal the wound of our nature. This, Aristophanes concludes, is what we call love, the pursuit of wholeness. It is a beautiful myth. It speaks to the deep loneliness we all feel, the sense that we are incomplete until we find a partner. But for Plato, it is not enough. It is too tragic. It looks backward to a lost past rather than forward to a divine future. When it is Socrates' turn to speak, the tone shifts. He does not give a speech of his own. Instead, he recounts a conversation he had years ago with a mysterious woman, a priestess from Mantinea named Diotima. This is a significant moment. In a world where women were silenced, the highest mysteries of love are revealed by a woman. She was Socrates' teacher in the art of love. Diotima begins by correcting the room. Love, she says, is not a god. Gods are perfect. They are happy. They possess everything good. But love is desire. And you only desire what you do not have. You do not desire what you already possess. Therefore, love must be a lack. It is a hunger. She tells a myth of her own. She says that on the day Aphrodite was born, the gods held a feast. Among them was Poros, the god of resource or plenty. He drank too much nectar and fell asleep in the garden of Zeus. Then came Peneia, the goddess of poverty. She was begging at the door, cold and hungry. Seeing Plenty asleep, she lay down beside him, hoping to conceive a child that would improve her fortunes. The child born of that union was Eros. Because of his mother, Poverty, love is always needy. He is rough, shoeless, and homeless, sleeping in doorways, always wanting. But because of his father, Plenty, love is clever, resourceful, and brave. He is a hunter. He is always scheming to acquire what is beautiful and good. Love is a spirit in between. It is midway between mortal and immortal, midway between ignorance and wisdom. It is the messenger that spans the gap between the human and the divine.
And what does this messenger want? Diotima tells Socrates that love is not just the desire for the beautiful. It is the desire to birth something in the beautiful. All human beings, she says, are pregnant. We carry seeds within us. Some are pregnant in body. They want to have children, to secure a kind of immortality through their offspring. This is a noble instinct.
It is nature's way of defying death. But others are pregnant in soul. They carry wisdom, virtue, and art. They want to give birth to poems, to laws, to ideas. And to do this, they need a beautiful environment. They need a muse. When a great mind meets a beautiful soul, it is inspired to create. And so Diotima leads Socrates and us to the foot of a ladder. This is the Scala Amoris, the ladder of love. It is the map of the soul's ascent from the mud of the earth to the stars of the heaven. The climb begins, as all human things must, with the body. The first rung of the ladder is the love of a single beautiful body. A young man sees a beautiful face, and he falls in love. He is obsessed. He writes poems. He sighs. He thinks there is no one else in the world like his beloved. This is the spark. It is necessary. Without this physical attraction, the engine would never start. But if he is guided correctly, he will move to the second rung. He will look around and realize that the beauty in his beloved is not unique. It is akin to the beauty in other bodies. A beautiful arm is like another beautiful arm. The curve of a neck is repeated in 1,000 forms. He realizes that it is foolish to be enslaved to just one instance. He becomes a lover of all beautiful bodies. His passion becomes less frantic, more expansive. He begins to love the form of the body rather than the individual. Then he climbs to the third rung. He realizes that the beauty of the soul is more precious than the beauty of the body. He meets someone who may not be physically striking, but who has a noble mind and a gentle spirit. He falls in love with their character. He begins to care about things that make young men better: virtue, honor, conversation. He moves from the physical to the moral. From there, he ascends to the fourth rung. He contemplates the beauty of activities and laws. He sees the elegance of justice. He realizes that this kind of beauty is more durable, more real than the bloom on a youthful cheek. Then the fifth rung. He turns to the sciences. He looks at the beauty of knowledge itself. He sees the beauty of astronomy, of geometry, of philosophy. He gazes upon the vast sea of knowledge and creates magnificent thoughts in his love of wisdom. And finally, if he has not tired, if he has kept climbing, he reaches the end. Suddenly, Diotima says, he will perceive a nature of wondrous beauty. This is the beatific vision. It is the form of beauty itself. Try to imagine it. It is not a face. It is not a sunset. It is not a mathematical theorem. It is the essence that makes all those things beautiful. It does not grow or decay. It is not beautiful from one angle and ugly from another. It is absolute, separate, simple, and everlasting. All the beautiful things we have ever loved in our lives, the person we kissed, the landscape we admired, the music that made us weep, were merely leaking a little bit of that radiance. They were shadows. Now the lover stands before the sun. He has birthed true virtue, not just images of virtue. He has become the friend of God. He has become, as much as a human can, immortal. This is the true meaning of Platonic love. In our modern speech, we use that phrase to mean a friendship without sex, a cold or distant thing. But for Plato, it is the exact opposite. It is a love so intense, so burning, that it transcends the physical. It does not reject the physical because it is prudish. It transcends the physical because it is hungry for something more. It is like a man who finds a gold coin in the mud. He picks it up. He loves the gold. But then he looks up and sees a chain of gold leading into the sky. He does not throw away the coin, but he uses it to climb. He climbs hand over hand, coin over coin, until he reaches the mine itself. Physical desire is not the enemy. It is the fuel. It is the launch pad. But you are not meant to stay on the launch pad. You are meant to fly. The symposium does not end with this high theology, however. Plato is a dramatist, and he knows that philosophy must always return to the messiness of life. Just as Socrates finishes his speech, there is a great noise at the gate. A band of revelers crashes in. They are drunk, shouting, crowned with ivy and violets. Leading them is Alcibiades. Alcibiades is the most famous man in Athens, handsome, wealthy, brilliant, and utterly reckless. He is the black horse of the city. He is drunk, and he demands to see Agathon. But then he sees Socrates. He stops. He begins to speak not about love in the abstract, but about his love for this strange, ugly philosopher. He compares Socrates to a statue of Silenus, those little clay figures sold in the shops, ugly and flute-playing on the outside, but if you crack them open, they contain golden statues of the gods. Alcibiades confesses his shame. He tells the room how he, the most desired man in Greece, tried to seduce Socrates. He wanted to trade his physical beauty for Socrates' wisdom. He cornered him, he wrestled with him, he slept beside him under the same cloak, but Socrates did not touch him. Alcibiades was humiliated. He says, "I was bitten by something more painful than a snake. I was bitten in the heart by philosophy." He sees in Socrates a man who has already climbed the ladder. Socrates is immune to the physical seduction of Alcibiades because he is looking at something else. He is looking at the form of beauty. How can a man who is staring at the sun be distracted by a candle? It is a poignant, tragic ending to the night. Alcibiades loved Socrates, but he could not follow him. He could not climb the ladder. He stayed on the lower rungs, enslaved by the love of the crowd, the love of power, the love of the body. And eventually, that love destroyed him and helped destroy Athens. Socrates, meanwhile, sits calmly amidst the chaos. As the night wears on, the other guests pass out, drunk and exhausted. Socrates keeps talking, sober and awake, discussing drama with the few who are still conscious. At dawn, he quietly stands up, walks to the Lyceum, washes himself, and spends the rest of the day in his usual way. He is the true lover. He is the one who has birthed virtue. He is the one who is free. As we drift through the night, let us consider this ladder. It is a map of our own longings. Why do we get bored? Why does the new car, the new house, the new romance eventually lose its shine? Why are we never quite satisfied? Plato tells us it is because we are trying to fill an infinite hole with finite things. We are trying to satisfy a hunger for the absolute with snacks from the world of flux. The restlessness we feel is the vibration of our wings. It is Eros, the child of poverty and plenty, whispering to us that we are poor, but that we could be rich. We are all lovers. We are all searching. We fall in love with a face, and we think, this is it. But it is not it. It is a signpost. It points past itself. It says, "Look higher." The beauty of the world is a breadcrumb trail laid down by the divine, leading us out of the forest. The gentle curve of a hill, the symmetry of a flower, the grace of a sleeping child, these are invitations. They are the universe flirting with us, trying to catch our eye.
We have explored the city within the soul and the city within the speech. We have climbed the ladder of love, ascending from the beauty of a single face to the beauty of the eternal forms. Now, Plato asks us to lift our eyes even higher. He asks us to look away from human affairs entirely, away from politics, away from ethics, even away from the private longings of the heart, and to gaze into the vast, silent machinery of the universe itself. We turn to the Timaeus. This is a dialogue unlike the others. It is not a street brawl of arguments. It is not a dramatic confrontation in a courtroom. It is a long, uninterrupted speech, a hymn to the order of the cosmos. The speaker is Timaeus of Locri, an astronomer and a Pythagorean, a man who has spent his life listening to the music of the spheres. He begins with a distinction that is by now familiar to us, the foundational rift in Plato's thought. There is that which is always and never becomes, the world of forms, and there is that which is always becoming and never is, the physical world. The world we see, the world of stars, sun, earth, and wind, is a physical thing. It is visible. It is tangible. Therefore, it belongs to the world of becoming. It is changing. And because it is changing, it must have had a beginning. And because it had a beginning, it must have had a cause. Enter the demiurge. The word means craftsman or worker for the people. In English, we might call him the divine architect. It is crucial, as we rest in the quiet of this narrative, to understand who this figure is and who he is not. The demiurge is not the creator god of later theology who speaks the universe into existence out of nothing. He is not a magician. He is an artist. Imagine a sculptor walking into a workshop. He finds a pile of clay. The clay is already there. He did not make it. But the clay is in chaos. It is shapeless, moving erratically, trembling with disorderly forces. It is a shaking receptacle, full of confused motion. The demiurge looks at this chaos, and then he looks up. He looks to the realm of the forms. He sees the eternal living creature, the perfect blueprint of a cosmos. He is good. This is the central axiom of Plato's physics. He was good, and in him that is good, no envy ever arises regarding anything. Because he is good, he wants everything to be as much like himself as possible. He wants order. He wants beauty. He wants intelligence. So he sets to work. He takes the discordant, chaotic mass of matter, and he begins to persuade it into shape. He imposes order on disorder. He brings measure to the unmeasured. He decides that this universe must be a living thing. It cannot be a dead rock. To be perfect, it must possess intelligence, and intelligence cannot exist without a soul. So the craftsman creates the soul, the world soul, the anima mundi. He mixes it in a great mixing bowl. He blends the categories of being, sameness, and difference. He stretches this soul out like a great fabric, and he weaves it through the entire body of the universe, from the center to the furthest star. He wraps the cosmos in it. This world soul is not a ghost. It is a mathematical structure. It is composed of harmonic intervals, the same ratios that govern the strings of a lyre. The universe is tuned. It is a great musical instrument, humming a song of perfect rationality.
The planets do not wander aimlessly. They move according to the laws of this soul, dancing in the circle of the same and the different. When we look up at the night sky, we are not looking at cold vacuum. We are looking at the visible body of a divine, living intelligence. The stars are moving thoughts. But the craftsman faces a problem. The model he is looking at, the forms, is eternal. It exists all at once. It has no past, no future, only an everlasting now. But the physical world is made of matter. It cannot be strictly eternal. It must move. It must change. So the demiurge creates a moving image of eternity. He creates time. He planned to make a movable image of eternity, and when he set in order the heavens, he made this image eternal, but moving according to number, while eternity itself rests in unity, and this image we call time. Before the heavens were made, there were no days, no nights, no months, no years. These are the measures of the turning sky. Time is the rhythm of the world soul. It is the mechanism by which the imperfect copy tries to imitate the stillness of the original. The universe spins, circling back on itself, trying to achieve the stability of the forms through the regularity of its motion. We live in this moving image. We are creatures of the clock. But the Timaeus reminds us that time is not an accident. It is a work of art. It is the heartbeat of the cosmos. Having established the soul and the time of the world, the craftsman turns to its body. He must forge the elements. Here, Plato merges philosophy with geometry. He asks, what are earth, air, fire, and water? They are not just distinct groups of matter. They must have a structure. They must be intelligible. Plato proposes that the elements are made of tiny, invisible geometric shapes. These are the famous Platonic solids. Imagine fire. It is hot. It pricks. It cuts. It moves quickly. Therefore, its particle must be the sharpest, the most mobile shape. It is the tetrahedron, a pyramid with 4 triangular faces. Its points are sharp angles. When fire burns you, it is because thousands of tiny tetrahedrons are cutting into your skin. Imagine earth. It is solid. It is stable. It is hard to move. Therefore, its particle must be the most stable shape. It is the cube. A box sits flat. It does not roll. It stacks. This is why the earth is firm beneath our feet. It is built of cubes. Imagine water. It flows. It is smooth. It tumbles over itself. Its particle is the icosahedron, a shape with 20 triangular faces. It is almost round, heavy, capable of rolling, yet complex. And finally, air. It is light, mobile, capable of penetrating everything. Its particle is the octahedron, 8 faces suspended between the sharpness of fire and the fluidity of water. There is a 5th shape, the dodecahedron, with 12 pentagonal faces. Plato says mysteriously that the god used this for the whole, the shape of the universe itself, perhaps related to the 12 signs of the zodiac, the pattern of the heavens. This is a breathtaking vision. It suggests that at the bottom of reality there is no mud, no chaos. There is only beautiful, precise mathematics. The world is a construction of triangles. It is a geometry problem solved by a god. This view, that nature is written in the language of mathematics, would lie dormant for centuries, only to be awakened by Kepler, Galileo, and Heisenberg. When modern physicists speak of quarks and symmetries, they are walking in the footsteps of Timaeus. But the craftsman is not all-powerful. He is not working in a vacuum. He is working with materials that resist him. Plato introduces a difficult, strange concept here. He calls it the receptacle, or the chora. It is the nurse of becoming. Imagine a goldsmith making different shapes out of gold: a ring, a cup, a coin. The shape changes, but the gold remains gold. The receptacle is like the gold, but even more abstract. It is the space in which all things appear. It has no character of its own. It is a blank matrix, a shaking, winnowing basket that receives the imprint of the forms. The physical world is the result of a negotiation, a struggle between the reason of the demiurge and the necessity of the receptacle. This is why the world is not perfect. The demiurge did the best he could, but he had to work with necessity. He had to work with the limits of the material. We see this in our own bodies. The head is made of thin bone to allow the brain to sense the world, but this thinness makes us vulnerable to injury. A thicker skull would be safer, but it would dull the senses. The god had to choose the better option, but he could not eliminate the trade-off. Perfection is compromised by the nature of the clay. This explains the presence of evil and disorder in a world made by a good god. It is not that the god wishes evil, it is that the material, errant cause pushes back.
Gravity pulls, flesh decays, the triangles break apart. But the dominant note of the Timaeus is not struggle, it is harmony. The universe is a visible God. It is a creature of immense beauty. It is whole, complete, and sufficient unto itself. It does not need eyes, for there is nothing outside of it to see. It does not need hands, for there is nothing outside of it to grasp. It spins in place, the perfect motion of the perfect sphere. And what of us? What is the human place in this geometric cathedral? We are microcosms. The structure of the human soul mirrors the structure of the world soul. We too are composed of the same and the different. We too have circles of reason turning within us. But our circles have been disturbed. At birth, the shock of entering the body shook our souls. The circles were bent and twisted. This is why babies are irrational. Their internal orbits are wobbly. The purpose of life, and specifically the purpose of studying astronomy and mathematics, is to correct these orbits. When we look at the stars, we are not just sightseeing, we are looking at the sanity of the universe. We watch the sun rise and set with perfect regularity. We watch the planets trace their harmonious paths, and by observing this order, we invite it into ourselves. God invented and gave us sight to the end that we might behold the courses of intelligence in the heaven and apply them to the courses of our own intelligence, which are kin to them, the unperturbed to the perturbed. We study the stars to calm the chaos in our own heads. We learn geometry to straighten the crooked lines of our own character. This is the great soothing promise of the Timaeus. We are not aliens in the universe. We are made of the same stuff. The triangles that form the distant nebula are the triangles that form the blood in our veins. The rationality that steers the galaxy is the rationality that flickers, however dimly, in our own minds. We are part of the art. As you lie in the dark, think of the room around you, the walls, the floor, the air you breathe. They feel solid, heavy, perhaps mundane, but Plato tells us they are vibrating with intelligence. They are a lattice of geometric forms held together by the will of the good. The chaos of the day, the noise, the stress, the unexpected disruptions, that is the errant cause, that is the shaking of the receptacle.
But underneath it, holding it all together, is the steady hand of the craftsman. There is a deep peace in this cosmology. It suggests that the universe is not indifferent. It was made. It was made with care. It was made to be a home for intelligence. The night sky, which may be visible from your window, or which you can see in the theater of your mind, is a lesson in stillness. It is the moving image of eternity. It turns century after century, a great wheel of time, grinding out the moments of our lives. But the wheel itself is held by an axle that does not move. We can align ourselves with that axle. We can let the revolutions of our own thoughts slow down. We can let the erratic motions of the day, the jagged triangular worries, smooth out into the circular motion of rest. The world soul wraps around us. The harmony of the spheres plays a music we cannot hear with our ears because it has been playing since the moment we were born, and we have nothing to compare it to. It is the background hum of existence. But in sleep, perhaps, we tune into it. In sleep, the body, the heavy earth, the sharp fire, relaxes its grip. The soul is free to float in the receptacle, to remember the geometry of its origin. The craftsman has finished his work for the day. The universe is spinning true. The stars are in their stations. The mechanism is sound. You are safe within the beautiful living animal of the cosmos. Let the geometry of the dark hold you. Let the order of the heavens seep into your dreams. The world is good, for it was made by the good, and you are part of it, a small but necessary circle in the great design. We have traveled a long road. We have seen the sun rise over the cave. We have seen the chariots racing in the heavens. We have watched the divine craftsman weave the soul of the world out of music and number. It has been a journey of ascent, a building of a great cathedral of thought, stone by stone, arch by arch, until the structure seemed complete, piercing the sky with its certainty. But the life of the mind is not a static thing. It is not a monument to be visited and admired from a distance. It is a living fire, and a fire must consume to survive. As Plato entered his later years, as the hair turned white and the shadows in the academy grew longer, he did something extraordinary. He did something that very few thinkers in the history of the world have had the courage to do. He turned his gaze back upon his own masterpiece. He picked up the hammer of logic, and he struck the very foundations of the theory he had spent his life constructing. This is the period of the critical dialogues. It is the twilight of the forms. But do not mistake twilight for darkness. Twilight is a time of extreme clarity, when the blare of the day has faded and the sharp outlines of the world stand out against the cooling sky. We turn to the dialogue called the Parmenides. It is a meeting of giants. Plato sets the scene in the distant past. He imagines a time when Socrates was very young, perhaps 19 or 20, full of youthful fire and confidence. And to Athens comes the great Parmenides, the venerable philosopher from Elea, who is 65 years old, white-haired and formidable. With him is his student, Zeno. It is a confrontation between the new philosophy and the old. The young Socrates is eager to show off his theory of forms. He explains it with the enthusiasm of a convert. He speaks of the form of beauty, the form of justice, the form of the good. He explains how physical things partake of these forms, and how this solves the problem of the one and the many. Parmenides listens. He is patient. He does not dismiss the boy. But then, with the gentleness of a master swordsman, he begins to ask questions. "Tell me, Socrates," he asks, "do you believe there is a form of likeness itself, and a form of unity?" "Yes," says Socrates. "And a form of the just, and the beautiful, and the good?" "Yes," says Socrates. "And what about a form of man, or fire, or water?" Socrates hesitates. He is not sure. "And what about," Parmenides continues, pressing further, "things that seem ridiculous and vile? Is there a form of hair, a form of mud, a form of dirt?" Socrates is horrified. He recoils. He cannot bear to think that the divine realm of forms contains the eternal archetype of mud. He says these things are just what they appear to be. Parmenides smiles. "You are still young, Socrates," he says. "Philosophy has not yet taken hold of you as it will later. You still care about the opinions of men. When you are older, you will not despise even the humblest of things." It is a moment of profound humility. Plato is admitting that his theory has gaps. If the forms are the causes of everything, they must also be the causes of mud as well as beauty. Reality is not just the pretty parts. But Parmenides is not done. He attacks the central mechanism of the theory, participation. How, he asks, does a physical object participate in a form? If the form of largeness is one thing, eternal and indivisible, how can it be present in 1,000 different large elephants at the same time? If the whole form is in each elephant, then the form is separated from itself. It is shattered. Socrates tries to find an analogy. Perhaps, he says, it is like the day. The day is one and the same, yet it is in many places at once, and it is not separated from itself. "That is a clever image," Parmenides replies. "But suppose you cover a crowd of men with a single sail. Would you say the whole sail is over each man, or only a part of it?" "A part," Socrates admits. "Then the forms are divisible," says Parmenides, "and if they are composed of parts, they are not the simple, eternal unities you claim they are." The young Socrates is stuck. The logic is tightening like a net. And then Parmenides delivers the blow that has echoed through the corridors of philosophy ever since. It is known as the third man argument. "Imagine," he says, "you look at a group of large things. You see a large tree, a large mountain, and a large building. You group them together in your mind, and you say they are all large because they share in the form of largeness. So now you have two things, the group of large objects and the form of largeness. But if you look at them together with your mind's eye, if you look at the great form of largeness and the little large tree side by side, do they not share a similarity? They are both large. Therefore, you need a new form to explain what they have in common. You need a superlargeness that stands behind the form of largeness. And now you have three things, and if you look at those, you will need a fourth and a fifth. It is an infinite regress. The form, which was supposed to be the single unique standard, has dissolved into an endless hall of mirrors. The third man stands behind the form of man, and a fourth man behind him, receding forever into the dark." Socrates is silenced. He has no answer. Most philosophers faced with such a demolition of their life's work would turn away in bitterness. They would defend their fortress. But Plato is not most philosophers. He writes this dialogue. He puts the arguments that destroy his theory into the mouth of the venerable Parmenides. He publishes his own doubts. Why? Because Plato cares more for the truth than for his own doctrine. He realizes that the theory of forms in its simple, youthful version is naive. It is too visual. It treats the forms like things, super-objects that exist in a super place. But they are not things. They are something more subtle, more difficult. Parmenides comforts the shaken Socrates. He tells him that the forms are necessary. Without them, there is no place for the mind to rest. Thought would be impossible. We could not speak. But to defend them, Socrates must undergo a rigorous training. He must learn the gymnastics of logic. He must learn to follow the argument wherever it leads, even into the paradox. This brings us to the sophist. Here, the main speaker is not Socrates. It is a stranger, a visitor from Elea, a follower of Parmenides. Socrates sits and listens. He is the student again. The dialogue is a hunt. They are trying to define a specific creature, the sophist. The sophist is the charlatan, the man who sells fake wisdom, the man who makes the false appear true. He is the shadow maker. But to catch him, they run into a metaphysical wall. The sophist deals in falsehoods. He says things that are not. He says, justice is only power, or the good is pleasure. These are lies. They are what is not. But the old Parmenides had laid down a terrifying law. Never let this thought prevail, that not being is. To think of nothing is impossible. To speak of nothing is to speak of nothing. Therefore, falsehood is impossible. Everything that can be spoken must exist. If the sophist speaks a lie, he is speaking that which is not. But that which is not does not exist, so he cannot be speaking it. It is a tangled knot of logic. If Parmenides is right, then lies do not exist, and the sophist cannot be caught. He hides in the darkness of non-being. To catch him, the stranger from Elea must do something terrible. He must kill his father, Parmenides. He must prove that in some sense that which is not exists.
This is the high watermark of Plato's technical philosophy. It is dry, difficult, and profound. The stranger argues that not being is not the opposite of being. It is not absolute nothingness. It is simply difference. When we say motion is not rest, we are not saying motion is nothing. We are saying motion is different from rest. It exists, but it is other than rest. Reality, Plato realizes, is not just a collection of frozen, isolated forms like statues in a museum. It is a web. It is a fabric. The forms communicate with one another. They blend. He identifies the great kinds, the fundamental threads of the universe: being, motion, rest, sameness, difference. Everything that exists participates in being, but it also participates in sameness. It is itself, and difference. It is not everything else. The form of motion is, so it participates in being, but motion is not rest, so it participates in difference relative to rest. The universe is a vast system of relations. To know a thing is not just to stare at it in isolation.
It is to know what it is same as and what it is different from. It is to weave it into the tapestry of truth. This solves the problem of the sophist. The sophist says things that are. He uses real words, but he weaves them together incorrectly. He combines theaetetus and flying. Theaetetus exists, flying exists, but the combination theaetetus is flying participates in difference from the facts. It is a false weaving. The sophist is caught. He is pulled out of his hiding place. He is not a magician creating nothingness. He is a bad weaver creating false patterns. As we listen to these arguments, we might feel we have drifted far from the poetic beauty of the symposium or the Phaedo. Where are the wings of the soul? Where is the sun? We are in the engine room now. We are looking at the gears. Plato is teaching us that spiritual intuition is not enough. It is wonderful to feel that there is a higher reality. It is wonderful to love the good. But if you cannot defend your ideas against the sharpest logic, if you cannot define your terms, your wisdom is fragile. It can be blown over by the first wind of skepticism. The gymnastic of the later dialogues is the hardening of the philosopher. It is the discipline that turns a lover of sights and sounds into a dialectician. There is a deep integrity in this. The old Plato does not rest on his laurels. He does not say, "I have written the Republic, my work is done." He remains a seeker until the end. He knows that the forms are the goal, but he also knows that the human mind is a flawed instrument for grasping them. He accepts the third man argument not as a defeat, but as a warning. It warns us not to treat the forms as if they were just physical objects in the sky. The form of man is not a big man in the clouds. It is the principle of humanity. It is a logical necessity, not a material ghost. The twilight of the forms is not the death of the theory. It is its maturation. It is the moment when the philosophy stops being a religion and starts being a science. And yet the longing remains. Even in the dry analysis of sameness and difference, the goal is the same. It is to find the truth. It is to clean the lens of the soul so that it sees clearly. The stranger from Elea, though he kills his father Parmenides in argument, is still a child of the same quest. He wants to know what is. He wants to distinguish the real from the fake, the philosopher from the sophist, the truth from the shadow. As the night deepens, let us reflect on this intellectual courage. It is easy to hold an opinion. It is easy to cherish a belief that makes us feel good. It is hard, very hard, to take that belief and place it on the anvil of reason and strike it with the hammer of criticism to see if it breaks. Plato did that. He struck his own ideas, and what remained, what survived the hammer, was stronger than before. The universe is woven together. Motion and rest, sameness and difference, they dance together in the light of being. We are part of that weave. Our thoughts are the shuttles moving back and forth, tying the threads, trying to catch the pattern. We may not be able to solve the puzzle of the one and the many tonight. We may not be able to catch the sophist in our own minds, but we can rest in the knowledge that the effort is noble. The mind that questions itself is the mind that is alive. The soul that admits "I do not know" is the soul that is ready to learn. The old philosopher puts down his stylus. The arguments of the Parmenides and the Sophist are laid out on the wax tablets. They are difficult, knotty, paradoxical, but they are honest. And in that honesty there is a kind of peace. It is the peace of the workman who has tested his tools and found them sharp. It is the peace of the traveler who knows that the map is accurate, even if the road is steep. Sleep now. The forms are watching. They are not the simple pictures we drew in our youth. They are vast, interconnected, deep as the ocean, but they are there, and the mind in its quiet hours knows how to swim.
The sun has set over the academy. The dialogues, those vibrant, dramatic conversations that captured the voice of Socrates, have mostly been written. The scrolls are rolled and stored in the library, but the teaching continues. In the final phase of his life, Plato, now an old man, walked the garden paths with a select group of students. Among them was the keen-eyed Aristotle, the foal who would one day kick against his master. In these quiet hours away from the public eye, Plato spoke of things he never committed to writing. These are the agrapha dogmata, the unwritten doctrines. For centuries, scholars have puzzled over a riddle. If Plato was the greatest writer of philosophy who ever lived, why would he keep his deepest thoughts off the page? The answer lies in a text known as the Seventh Letter. In it, Plato, or someone writing with his voice, confesses a profound distrust of the written word. Writing, he says, is like a painting. The figures stand there as if they were alive, but if you ask them a question, they remain silent. They say the same thing over and over again. A book cannot choose its reader. It rolls about everywhere, reaching those who understand it and those who have no business with it. True philosophy, Plato believed, is not a set of doctrines to be memorized from a scroll. It is a living state of mind. It is a fire. There is no writing of mine about these matters, the letter says, nor will there ever be, for this knowledge is not something that can be put into words like other sciences, but after long continued intercourse between teacher and pupil in joint pursuit of the subject, suddenly, like light flashing forth when a fire is kindled, it is born in the soul and straightway nourishes itself. The spark, that is what he sought, and the spark can only fly between two living minds in the friction of conversation, in the shared life of the academy. So, what was this secret teaching? What was the fire that burned in the inner circle? We must rely on the reports of his students, particularly Aristotle, to reconstruct it. And what they tell us is surprising. They tell us that in the end, Plato did not speak of justice or virtue or even the forms as we know them. He spoke of numbers. There is a famous story of a public lecture Plato once gave, titled On the Good. A great crowd gathered. They expected to hear about happiness, about wealth, about how to live a good life. Instead, Plato stood before them and spoke of geometry, of astronomy, and of the One. He spoke of the ultimate principles of the universe in the language of high mathematics. The crowd was baffled. Most of them left. But for the inner circle, this was the final revelation. Plato had come to believe that the forms themselves, those eternal archetypes of man, horse, and beauty, were not the bottom of reality. They were derived from something even deeper. They were the children of two ultimate opposing principles.
The first principle is the one, the monad. This is the principle of unity. It is the limit. It is the light. It is the active force that imposes identity on things. It is akin to the good. It is the reason why a thing is one thing, why a tree is a tree and not a chaotic explosion of wood. The second principle is the indefinite dyad. This is the principle of multiplicity. It is the great and the small. It is the unlimited. Imagine a line that can stretch out forever in both directions, or a quantity that can be infinitely divided. It is the fluid, shifting, chaotic potential of the universe. It is the darkness that waits to be filled. All reality, the unwritten doctrines claim, is generated by the interaction of these two powers. The one acts on the dyad, the limit acts on the unlimited, and the result is number. And from number come the forms, and from the forms comes the physical world. It is a Pythagorean vision of absolute purity. It suggests that the universe is not just described by mathematics, it is mathematics. The structure of reality is a musical scale, a ratio, a geometric progression. Consider the progression. From the two principles comes the number 1, then the number 2, then 3 and 4. These are not just quantities, they are the dimensions of space. 1 is the point, 2 is the line, 3 is the plane, 4 is the solid. From these numbers, the soul is built. From these numbers, the heavens are hung. This teaching suggests that the good is not just a moral quality, it is a mathematical state. It is unity. To be good is to be integrated, whole, one. To be bad is to be scattered, multiple, divided. The tyrant is bad because his soul is a chaotic many. The philosopher is good because his soul has become a unified one. This was the dry, high air of the Academy's final years. It was a move away from the poetry of the myths toward the precision of the axiom. It was an attempt to find a language that could not be twisted by sophists, a language of pure structure. But while Plato's mind soared into the mathematical heavens, his eyes were still fixed on the earth. He had one final task to complete, one massive, heavy book that would serve as his last testament to the human race. It is called the Laws. If the Republic was the work of a visionary midlife, full of radical hope, the Laws is the work of old age. It is the longest of his dialogues, and in it the figure of Socrates is gone. He is replaced by an anonymous Athenian stranger. The setting is no longer the bustling port of Athens. It is the island of Crete. 3 old men, the Athenian, a Spartan, and a Cretan, are walking slowly from the coast up to the cave of Zeus on Mount Ida. It is a long, hot walk. They stop to rest under cypress trees, and as they walk, they plan a colony. They are building a city called Magnesia. But this city is different from the Republic. In the Republic, Plato dreamed of philosopher kings, men so wise, so perfect, that they did not need laws. They were living laws. But in the Laws, the old Plato admits a painful truth. Such men are rare. Perhaps they do not exist at all. Men are not born with a nature that knows what is good for human life, the stranger says, and even if they know it, they are corrupted by power. If we cannot have the rule of the best men, we must settle for the second best. We must have the rule of law. The law is a golden cord that pulls the city toward reason. It must be rigid. it must be comprehensive. In Magnesia, everything is regulated: marriage, education, drinking parties, music, religion. It is a theocracy of reason. It feels severe. The freedom of the individual is tightly constrained, but the motivation is compassion. The old philosopher looks at humanity and sees how frail we are. We are puppets, he says, jerked about by the strings of our desires. We dance to the pull of pleasure and pain. The law is the gentle hand that holds the strings, keeping the puppet from collapsing into a heap. There is a deep, somber piety in the laws. The universe is full of gods. The stars are living intelligences. The cosmos is a temple. The stranger proposes a new institution to watch over the city. It is not a king, it is the nocturnal council. This council meets just before dawn, when the city is asleep and the mind is clearest. It is composed of the oldest, wisest citizens. Their job is to study the stars. Their job is to understand the mathematical unity of virtue. While the citizens sleep, the council watches. They anchor the city to the cosmos. It is a beautiful, quiet image to hold in the mind. The old men sitting in the twilight of the morning, gazing at the turning of the heavens,
ensuring that the human city remains in rhythm with the divine dance. As Plato wrote these thousands of pages, he himself was approaching the final silence. He was 80 years old. He had lived through the fall of an empire, the death of his teacher, the failure of his political experiments in Sicily, and the rise of his school. He had seen the world of becoming in all its violence and tragedy, and he had built within his own mind a ladder to the world of being. We can imagine him in those last days. The physical eyes which had seen so much were growing dim. The body, the oyster shell, was wearing thin, but the eye of the soul was wide open. He did not fear death. Why should he? He had spent his life practicing for it. He knew that the soul was a number, a harmony, a self-moving motion that could not be destroyed. He knew that he was merely returning to the star from which he fell. The ancient sources give us two different accounts of his death. One story says he died at a wedding feast. We can picture the scene, the music, the wine, the laughter of young people celebrating union. And there, in the midst of the noise of life, the old philosopher quietly closes his eyes and slips away. It is a fitting end for the author of the symposium, leaving the party while the others are still reveling, stepping out into the cool night. The other story says he died in his sleep, while a Thracian girl played the flute nearby. He listened to the rhythm of the music, the mathematical intervals of the sound, and drifted from the melody of earth to the melody of the spheres. Either way, it was a gentle passing. There was no hemlock, there was no prison. There was just the quiet conclusion of a long circular journey. When he died in 347 BC, he left behind the academy. It would stand for another 900 years, the longest-lived university in the history of the West. He left behind the dialogues, which would be read, copied, lost, and found again, preserving the conversation of Socrates for eternity. But more than that, he left behind a way of seeing. He taught us that the invisible is more important than the visible. He taught us that the world is not a random accident, but a work of art. He taught us that we are not beasts, but souls capable of waking up. The unwritten doctrines, the lectures on the one and the dyad, these were lost to the wind. We have only fragments.
but the spirit of them remains. It is the conviction that at the bottom of everything there is order, there is light, there is good. As you lie in your bed, suspended between waking and sleeping, you are participating in the mystery Plato described. The body is heavy, it belongs to the earth, it needs to rest. But the mind, the part of you that understands, that dreams, that listens, is light. Let the golden cord of sleep pull you gently toward the center. Let the great and the small, the endless worries of the day, the multiplicity of things to do, fade away. Let them be absorbed by the one. In the philosophy of the aging Plato, there is no room for anxiety. There is only the steady, rhythmic movement of the whole. The stars turn, the sun rises, the laws of mathematics hold the roof up. You do not need to worry about the universe. It is in good hands. The nocturnal council is watching. The geometrical god is crafting. The one is radiating its quiet power, holding the many together in a single silent embrace. You are part of that unity. You are a thought in the mind of the cosmos. And as the noise of the world recedes, you can hear the silence that lies behind the numbers. It is a silence that is not empty. It is full. It is the silence of perfection. Rest now in that fullness. The lesson is over. The book is closed. The old philosopher has put down his pen and walked into the garden to watch the stars. Follow him there into the peace of the night. We stand now at the end of the history, but not at the end of the thought. In the year 529 A.D., 900 years after Plato walked the olive grove, the Roman Emperor Justinian issued an edict. He ordered the closing of the pagan schools in Athens. The academy, the institution that had survived empires, wars, and the slow erosion of centuries, was finally shuttered. The teachers packed their scrolls, the statues were toppled or buried. The noise of the dialectic, which had hummed in that garden for nearly a millennium, fell silent. To the historian looking only at the surface of things, this might seem like the death of Platonism. It might seem that the light which was kindled in the shadow of the Parthenon had finally been extinguished by the winds of a new age. But Plato had taught us to look beyond the surface. He had taught us that the physical manifestation is merely a shadow of the reality. The academy was made of stone and wood, and therefore it belonged to the world of becoming. It was destined to perish. But the idea of the academy, the spirit of inquiry, the hunger for the eternal, belonged to the world of being, and that could not be closed by an imperial decree. Long before the doors were locked, the philosophy had already migrated. It had left its body and become pure spirit. It had flowed out of Athens like water from a spring, feeding the roots of civilizations Plato himself never dreamed of. This transmission is what the ancients called the Sira Chrysaea, the golden chain. It is the lineage of great souls passing the lamp of wisdom from one to another across the dark waters of time. The first great link in this new chain was forged not in Greece, but in Egypt, in the cosmopolitan city of Alexandria, and later in Rome. In the 3rd century A.D., a man named Plotinus emerged. He was a quiet, ascetic man, a teacher who seemed ashamed to be in a body at all. He took the teachings of Plato, the forms, the good, the soul, and he refined them into a vision of breathtaking mystical purity. This is what we call Neoplatonism. For Plotinus, the good of Plato became the one. Imagine a fountain that has no source, a spring that never runs dry. It overflows simply because it is full. This is the one. It is the absolute, transcendent source of all existence. It is beyond being. It is beyond thought. It is beyond speech. You cannot name it, for to name it is to limit it. You can only point to it in silence. From this one, reality flows out in great cascading waves. This is the doctrine of emanation. The one overflows and produces the divine intellect, the nous. This is the realm of the forms. It is the mind of God, containing the perfect patterns of all things. The intellect overflows and produces the soul, the psyche. This is the life force that animates the universe, the weaver of time and space. And finally, at the very edges of the light, the soul produces the physical world, nature. Matter is the point where the light finally fades into darkness. For Plotinus and for the Neoplatonists who followed him, the purpose of human life was to reverse this flow. We are souls who have drifted far from the source. We are sparks trapped in the darkness of matter. Our duty is the flight of the alone to the alone. It is a solitary journey. It requires turning inward, stripping away the senses, stripping away the emotions, stripping away even the intellect, until the soul stands naked before its source and merges with it in a moment of ecstatic union. This was Plato's philosophy, transformed into a religion of the interior. It kept the rigorous logic, but it added a burning, mystical heart. And it was this version of Plato, this luminous spiritual hierarchy, that found its way into the hands of a young, troubled rhetorician in North Africa in the 4th century A.D. His name was Augustine. Augustine was searching. He was torn, much like the charioteer, between the high desire for truth and the heavy pull of the flesh. He read the books of the Platonists, likely translations of Plotinus, and there he found the key. He realized that God was not a physical being. God was not a body. God was a spiritual light, as truth itself, Plato had said. Augustine saw that the Platonic forms were not just abstract concepts floating in a void. They were the eternal thoughts in the mind of the Christian God. When Augustine converted to Christianity, he did not leave Plato behind. He baptized him. He brought the gold of the Egyptians into the promised land. Through Augustine and later through Boethius and Dionysius, the DNA of Platonic thought was woven into the very structure of the Western mind. The medieval cathedrals, with their soaring vertical lines drawing the eye upward, are architectural expressions of the Platonic ascent. The theology of the Middle Ages, with its hierarchy of angels and its vision of the beatific God, is the Republic and the Timaeus singing in a new key. The Academy fell, but its curriculum became the curriculum of the world. The study of the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music, remained the foundation of education for 1,000 years. Why? Because the conviction handed down from the Republic that studying the order of the universe prepares the soul for the vision of God. Then came the Renaissance. The manuscripts that had been sleeping in the libraries of the East returned to Italy. Men like Marsilio Ficino lit candles before the bust of Plato in Florence. Artists like Raphael painted the school of Athens, placing Plato in the center, an old man pointing his finger toward the sky, reminding us where the truth resides. and so the river flowed on, broad and deep, into the modern world. In the 20th century, the philosopher Alfred Northwood Whitehead looked back over the vast expanse of European thought and delivered a verdict that has become famous. The safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it is a series of footnotes to Plato. It sounds like an exaggeration, but consider the questions we still ask in our universities, in our parliaments, and in the quiet of our own bedrooms. When we ask, is this law just, or is it merely powerful? We are asking the question of Thrasymachus and Socrates. When we ask, is this scientific theory true, or is it just a useful model? We are asking about the difference between the shadows and the fire. When we ask, what is the meaning of love? We are climbing the ladder of Diotima. When we ask, is there a soul that survives death? We are sitting in the prison cell with the Phaedo. You cannot escape him. The mental landscape we inhabit was mapped by him. The very language we use to talk about ideals, concepts, reality, and truth was forged in the fire of his mind. Plato is not a tyrant of thought. He does not demand that we agree with him. He did not even agree with himself. He spent his final years questioning his own theories. He demands only that we think. He demands that we do not settle for the unexamined life. His legacy is not a set of answers, it is a posture. It is the posture of the man or woman who stops rushing, who stops fighting for the shadows on the wall and turns around. It is the posture of the soul looking up. And now we have come to the end of our journey. We have walked through the market of Athens. We have seen the death of the best man. We have traveled through the realms of the forms. We have descended into the cave and climbed back out. We have struggled with the horses of the soul. We have built the city in speech. We have gazed at the geometry of the stars. The path has been steep. The air has been thin. But now we can rest. Philosophy, Plato said, is a kind of waking up, but it is also a preparation for the ultimate rest. It is the gathering of the soul into itself, the quieting of the senses, the withdrawal from the noise of the great and the small.
As you lie here in the safety of the night, you are enacting the final lesson of the academy. You are letting go of the world of becoming. Think of the things that have troubled you today, the small injustices, the unfinished tasks, the fleeting desires. They are drifting away now. They are shadows cast on the wall. They are not the reality. The reality is the silence that holds you. The reality is the mind that watches the shadows fade. You are a citizen of the eternal city. Your soul has a home in the place that does not change. The forms, justice, beauty, the good, they are not far away. They are woven into the fabric of your being. You carry the memory of them within you, like a melody you heard long ago and are just beginning to hum again. The golden chain is not broken. It passes through you. By asking the questions, by loving the truth, by seeking the calm in the chaos, you add your own link to the chain. The old philosopher is tired now. The scroll is rolled up. The lamp in the study flickers and goes out. The argument is over. The dialectic dissolves into the peace of the one. Let the black horse sleep. Let the white horse rest his head. Let the charioteer lay down the reins. The journey is done for the night. The universe turns slowly,
silently on its axis. The craftsman watches over his work. All is well. All is ordered. All is one. Drift now. Drift into the deep geometrical silence. Drift toward the memory of the sun. The night is dark, but the eye of the soul can see in the dark. If you have made it this far without drifting off, leave a comment below about what you think, and if you would want to, like and subscribe to support future topics. Thank you, and good night.